Good afternoon, church. Here we are in my house. We're actually at my chair. My chair is always next to my window, where I can look right outside and see my horses. So we're going to try doing Thursday Bible studies. So we're going to start with we kind of made a informal vote and decided to go with Johannian literature. By Johannian literature, we mean those books in the Bible that are ascribed to the Apostle John, who in the Gospel of John is referred to as the disciple whom Jesus loved. And we're going to be looking then first at the Gospel according to John, and then we're going to be looking at the three letters, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and then at the very end we'll look at Revelation. And I figured this should take us the whole year. So we'll start here with our virtual Bible study, and then our Thursday at 1 o'clock Bible studies will switch when we can meet again. Yay! Eventually, person to person, we'll continue with Johannian literature there. So I just want to open up with a few little things. First of all, is that the Gospel of John, scholars believe, was written between 80 and 110 AD. Now we know that Jesus died in 33 AD. So, did John the Apostle actually pen all of it? Or are these his stories that he shared with his disciples, and it's written in, in John's voice, like having his own scribe kind of thing? But who cares? What I really care about is that it's canonical. God has inspired it, and John and the apostle and his accounts. The reason a lot of scholars do believe that John himself probably wrote it is that many of the things that are written in the Gospel of John are personal. They're his personal kind of reflections. For instance, the author knows Jewish life very well. And the disciple whom Jesus loved, or John, who traveled with Jesus for 3 years, would have known that. He knows about the hostility between the Jews and the Samaritans, so he writes as one who lived in that time. He knows the Jewish customs, like the duty of circumcision on the 8th day, etc. He knows the geography of the Holy Lands very well, and many reflect the recollections of an eyewitness. So as we go through the Gospel according to John, we're going to see a very different Jesus than what you see in the Synoptic Gospels, which are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John is very different from the three. First of all, he writes and focuses on the signs of Jesus' identity and his mission, and lengthy theological discourses throughout the book. He also focuses more on spiritual themes than he does on historical events. So there are 21 chapters in the book, and it begins in John 1, which is the foundational truth from God of who Jesus is. In other words, Jesus is God in the flesh. If he's God in the flesh, which is what the opening of John 1, which I asked you to read for today, says, then John then needs to answer, then what would he be like? If he is God in the flesh, then who is he? And then also not only what would he be like, but what would he do? How would he live in relationship to the Father once he came to earth? How would people know that he was God? Would he force people to believe in him? And what would those who refuse to believe that he is God, what would he do about those? And for those who believed, then who followed him? And what God in the flesh expects from them? And then what happens if they fail? So we're talking about, in the Gospel of John, God in the flesh. So it's going to be hard for some to believe, and we're going to see that in the gospel. But their belief or unbelief really does then become a matter of life and death. In fact, in John 3:16, we really have the summary of the entire gospel. And then at the end of the gospel, we actually do see, Jesus John writing that he could have written so much more, but these are the things that he wrote so that people would believe in him. So we're going to start into the Gospel according to John. So I'm going to ask you to stop this video. Well, actually, I'm going to end this video. And I want you to read the first, from John 1:1 through John 16. John 1:1 through 16. I want you to read those. And then when you finish reading that and you think about who you really believe that Jesus is and whether you really believe that he is God made flesh. And then the next question to ask yourself before I come back on with another part is, do you live accordingly? Does that make a difference in your life? And I'll be back in just a few minutes.